get that. So we stopped that, and then we went back to that supplement, and then we figured it out. And then we went back into, it was like a thing, but we got it done, and it wasn't too bad. I felt like this chapter was a lot shorter. So,
well, I did. I had put that up last semester, so I paced that course over. And damn. Everybody got stuck because I tried to make it shorter because it's a lot of work. And what I did when I made it shorter was I omitted that essential piece, which was dumb.
Yeah, because it just went from like us learning like what was like direct, indirect, variable, product and stuff like that to just like do the balance sheet or the income sheet or whatever. And we're like, wait, this has nothing to do with what we were doing.
Right.
So but we got it figured out, which is good.
Well, look at that. Get a flu shot, everybody.
All employees.
I assume that means students. Okay. As you can see, I'm still in the middle of this thing with Katie Bray. I'm going to get started. I don't know who's here, but we're going to roll. We're going to roll for now. To connect with Sapling, I keep getting that, and they're going to send me this, and then it'll be able to connect. So I don't understand what the hell. I blame myself, and I blame a lot of people working from home, and I don't know. This is a very strange time, but nonetheless, you don't care. You paid for something. Or not. Is anybody paying for classes ever? Do you pay for classes? And whatever it is, it's cheap. Isn't it? Do you realize that when I went to college, my dad and I were talking the other day. I went to the University of Connecticut at 16, right out of high school. I graduated high school early, and I got accepted to the University of Connecticut as an ag student, and I wasn't really getting along with my parents in those days. I know that's surprising to some of you, but particularly my mother. She was just not. She was not seeing things my way. But anyway, when I said I'm going to college, my three sisters went to private colleges, and I went to the state school because I wasn't going to accept money from my parents. And because I was a jerk, and so I could pay for the University of Connecticut with my summer job. I mean, I did not struggle. Don't think it was some kind of an epic struggle for me to pay for my. So it's not. I'm not just more virtuous than you because I could pay for my school and you can't. The price of school went off the goddamn charts. And it was ridiculous. And it's all because of that over there, which is administration, but we won't even get into that. The idea that my tuition was basically $800 a semester for 14 or 16 credits. I took 16 credits because I was a science major, animal science. So I had 2 labs. Yeah, I always had 2 labs, so it was, anyway, 16 credits, $800. I can't remember how much that was. That $200 a credit? Yeah, no. Whatever. Less than that. 100 a credit.
20.
Yeah. Anyway, and room and board was another $1,200. So if I could work all summer, I could make enough and work Christmas break. And I always had a job while I was at school. I was like making money going to school. I was able to bank money going to school. Those days are gone, and that's an interesting economic artifact of government intervention into the educational system. And we're going to go into that today. We're going to go into. I'm going to finish up. Supply and demand, and then we're going to go into meddling with markets, which is my favorite chapter of the entire book. and I get to do it in micro, and I get to do it in macro. Meddling with markets. What does that mean? And I'm going to put up meddling. What is meddling? Somebody look that up on Google. What is a meddler? You ever see like cartoons? You know, like Swiper. Who was Swiper on Dora the Explorer? He was meddling in everybody's affairs.
You watched Dora the Explorer?
Yeah, I watched Dora. What do you think? I got a kid. I did. I'm out of the Dora the Explorer thing. The movie was awesome though. It was. So if I go into assignments here, you realize we have supply and demand of policing. I want to show you one thing on that. Ton of uncertainty. I had no idea events would unfold the way they do. Now we're starting to look at that in sort of the rearview mirror. The riots and things, even though I think some of them are ongoing, if you have the amount of police out there that we have, you're gonna have mistakes. The idea that you wouldn't is absurd. The idea that there's not some racist son of a bitch who's got a badge is silly. There is. That doesn't mean they all are. And it doesn't mean whatever. I put this up here so we can get into these cringy subjects because nobody, we're in college to talk about this crap. I put up Rothbard here, equilibrium, price, and quantity. You see, it's a microeconomics lecture, but this is what we're doing right now would be considered microeconomics. And this is Murray Rothbard. He's a libertarian, and he'll give you a lecture on supply and demand and show you what it means. Equilibrium, price, and quantity for every good and service. So we went through that in the last stack of in Macmillan in the last stack of PowerPoints, and I can put it up here. Watch this. So when you do supply and demand, right? Here's price, here's quantity, whatever it is. Okay? Let's say it's time. Right? As the price of your time goes up, where's the quantity going to go? Right? Down. Okay? But let's look at some other commodity. Time is an interesting one to think about. I was thinking about it this morning because I don't have time for this damn Macmillan problem. I don't have time for it. The market's opening and they're sending me emails. I have to make money, unfortunately. So let's put price and quantity here. Well, how does price work? And here's a supply line. Here's a demand line, right? Let's just say it's rents. Okay? This represents equilibrium, price, and quantity. Maybe this is for the Roaring Fork Valley. RFC. If you're not here, you can apply this to we're all in mountain towns, so it's sort of the same. There's always a shortage of housing or some kind of housing crisis bullshit going on. I'm going to show you why that is. But let's say at $1,000, what's a one bedroom going for now? $1,300?
A what?
A one bedroom apartment.
Oh yeah, easy. 13, 16, whatever.
Let's say 1,600. So P1 is equilibrium at 1,600 one bedroom apartments. One bedroom apartment, the quantity is going to be something like 5,000. There's not that many people in the valley that require one bedroom apartments. You guys. Me, I have a wife and daughter. We can't do that anymore. We could when I was young. Now there's plenty, as you know, and I know too. There's plenty of immigrants doing 1-bedroom apartments with whole families. They're out there, but they're happy to do it to get the American way of life, to try and get ahead. That's the way you get ahead, right? You suck it up and do the $1,300 or $1,600 1-bedroom, and you bank the money. You start saving. But anyway, price and quantity 1,600, 5,000 units. Now, what happens if we go up to, let's say the government comes and they say, "Thou shalt not rent for more than $1,000. We do what's called an affordable housing program, right? Because it's just not fair. Now, knowing what we know from the last stack, we have this equilibrium price and quantity, and I'll start with that. Here's the price, the market clearing price for rents. But the government comes in and they say, "Thou shalt not charge more than $1,000. Under penalty of law, you will go to jail if you charge," and they go around and they decide which apartments get this, what we call rent control, and there's a bureau and a bureaucracy and a committee, and we know better, and all that kind of crap. And so they set these at 1,000. What's going to happen? You can see right here. Where's the supply going to go? It's going to go to Q2. Where's the demand going to go? It's going to go to Q3. Every time. There's not the lost city of underneath the water. What was that one? Atlantis. Atlantis didn't make this work. There's no making this work. 100% of economists who are not conflicted by some political view know that when you lower the price to $1,000 by force, you will have less quantity and you will have more demand. So you will increase your shortage of housing by implementing the rent control that seeks to help the people who can't afford the housing. Okay? So this is what happens, and then usually what happens is, if you want to look at a good one, you can look at the Aspen-Pitkin County Housing Authority, APCHA. APCHA's been around since, I believe, 1973. And I did a Google search on APCHA, the housing authority. We've been shoveling money to APCHA every year, year in and year out, tax dollars. Since 1973, have they solved the problem? No, the answer is no, because everyone knows we still have a housing problem, right? So if you tell me in 2020 that APCHA, the Aspen-Pitkin County Housing Authority, has got the solution for the housing crisis, I'm going to go, I don't think so. I think that the market has the solution, right? Now there's some other factors involved, and we'll go over that. I'm going to return to this example over and over so that you know what I'm really getting at here. But the other thing that sets prices, that changes prices, is zoning. Zoning laws. Thou shalt not build a house on less than 2 acres. So there's a zoning law in Aspen, and just to throw some gasoline on this fire before I go into the stack of PowerPoints, Aspen puts a zoning, the rich people up in Aspen, most of them lefties, they think they are, made their money due to capitalism or some other kind of government scheme, but nonetheless, they get piles of money, and they decide that, well, we want 2-acre zoning because we want to keep Aspen beautiful. For us, is what they're saying. For us, we want to zone you out, right? That includes me, by the way, so don't feel bad. I'm not the billionaires are zoning out the millionaires. So shit rolls downhill. So what they do is instead of saying, here's a 2-acre lot, what they say up there is you can put one house here. So if you're a builder, what kind of house are you going to put? Low-income housing that you can rent for, because you had to buy this lot, of course, for $2 million. So you're going to put up a $6 million house, right? And Jack Nicholson's going to live there. I don't want to pick on Jack. I don't know. Somebody's going to live there. Some ex-politician is going to live there. Whereas, if you left it up to me, I would do this. Right? I like La Mezcla. I like to have all the people who work in the town. I like to have those people around. I don't think they should have to drive up 82. And even if I was like Mr. Environmentalist, I am. Everybody is, but I just don't buy into the whole hydrocarbon thing. But let's pretend I did. I would say, hey, the way to get rid of congestion on 82 is by allowing 9 houses where there used to be 1. Get rid of the zoning. So what does the zoning do? It increases this price. Okay? So you have an oversupply of rich people housing and 0 poor people housing. Now, you can ask yourself, and it's delicious for someone like me to look at that problem, because then I could go, well, all the lefties up in Aspen are actually racist, because the people they're really classist. I don't think they're, but the people that get zoned out are who? Immigrants, poor people. They get zoned out. So they're driving up from Rifle, right, on 82, chugging along, Honda Civic, going, what the hell am I doing? I'm driving an hour to work, right? Whereas if they changed the zoning, I could live at Maralt. Or they could put like three or 4 like high rises at Cozy Point. All done. Beautiful community. We could set it into the mountains. It would look nice. You got to trust these entrepreneurs. They would make it look beautiful. I promise. It would be environmentally whatever and all that cool stuff, right? Green high rises and all that. And so, we can't have that. Why? Well, we want to preserve our way of life. They start talking in these effed up euphemisms, right? They start saying, well, then, we want to see the mountains, and we don't want any obstructed views. And it's just, when they start talking like that, just know it's bullshit. Okay? But we've got a solution to this. We'll tax everybody and start a thing called RAFTA, which is the Roaring Fork Transit Authority. So we'll subsidize that and happily bus all of you people up to Aspen. And I'm going to pay for that with my property taxes down in Glenwood. I got to pay for a tax to bus people up to Aspen to work. That's a Tea Party deal, right? We threw tea into the ocean in Boston Harbor because of that. That's taxation without representation, right?
What's
Question?
What's Atlanta's bus system called?
MARTA.
What's that stand for?
I don't even talk. Don't even go there. I see bus systems as classist at least, right? You're saying, well, we're gonna throw you a bone so you won't have to spend too much on gas getting to your job amongst the elite. Oh, it's great stuff. Where's the Post-Independent on that? Why is somebody writing an article about that? Why? It's so easy to see that. What, you've had 3 weeks of basically of microeconomics. I mean, that's pure logic. It's supply and demand, right? And Krugman does not agree. Does not disagree with me on that. He agrees. There's no disagreement on that effect. We just kind of let it go because everybody's tribal, and I mean that in a academic term, not like Kelly's a Wampanoag. Tribal in that I want to live amongst my class of people. It's like, what? That's some bad shit, right? I don't feel that way. Although I live up here in Spring Valley because I don't like HOAs. I want to be able to have dogs and shoot guns, but that's me. Should you be allowed to do that? Should you be allowed to, through zoning, change the supply and demand for housing to protect what you might quote unquote your way of life? All right. So that's where it gets fun. Let's go back to here. So this same thing happens with police, right? What is the right amount of police? This is what I'm getting at with this. What's the right amount of police, right? So if you were to draw a supply and demand curve for police, which is what I want you to do, what I'm saying is, and this is, I want to say it this way, but for, and that's a legal term. When you take law, you'll hear that. But for, and this is one of the causes when you look at causality. But for the incredible amount of police, George Floyd is alive. In other words, if there weren't so many police on duty on that shift, George Floyd lives. So you could say, because they just wouldn't respond to that, right? Whoever, he passes a $20 bill, and let me know if I'm screwing up the story. He passes a phony $20 bill in some bodega in downtown LA or downtown Minneapolis, and the clerk, who's known him forever, he's been an alcoholic and addict forever, he's me, and he's like, dude, George just showed up and he gave us his bill. 4 cops showed up. So in my world, there's not enough cops to fool around with that. So the dispatcher goes, listen, we know, we get it. We know George. Everybody knows George. He's a lovable guy when he's sober, right? When he's loaded, he's reasonably dangerous. We will go see him tomorrow morning, in the morning, when he's sober, and ask him about this thing. Because we know he's high right now. So why poke that bear, is what I'm saying. And if you don't have all these cops running around, you don't poke that bear. You don't have time to poke that bear. You're busy doing important things, right? Hopefully. So my thesis, and believe me, this is a complex problem, but one issue is too many police. We're oversupplied with police. And I wanted to get it down. See, if you were writing a dissertation, you would say, I'm going to examine the effect of oversupply of police due to government intervention in the marketplace. And that's what we're going to get to in today's stack, right? So when you have governments that have unlimited budgets and you have politicians that are buying votes through taking care of or having bad relationships with unions, right? And things like that, you end up with a policing system that is more apt to be corrupt. Okay? And I didn't say racist or anything like that. I listen to Shelby Steele. I listen to, if you want to talk about racism in police forces and you want it from the perspective of black scholars, you must look up Glenn Lowry. Again, I don't need to beat that horse, but Shelby Steele. If you're just going to listen to Maya D'Angelo and not come back and read these two gentlemen, you're not getting educated, you're getting indoctrinated. Okay? Read D'Angelo if you'd like. I found her book pitifully bad, but go ahead. You should do it. I did. Now, finally. And now, Glenn Lowry and Shelby Steele, and on from there. Tom Sowell, who studied discrimination and disparities for 45 years plus. So these are not people who come into this discussion with all kinds of biases. They're studying it on an academic level. So let's do that. All right, back to this. So, do you think free market is capable of providing police to communities? I do. I think Minneapolis, if left alone, the community would go, okay, what do we need? Do we need to go through government or not? The mothers and fathers of the children in that community, much like the educational system, would get together. They'd be forced to. They'd go, look, I don't care if we're both working, 2 jobs. We got to figure this out because our kids are dying in the streets, right? They're shooting. These are crimes in that community. Let's worry about that. So what kind of policing do we want? Well, we want community policing. Okay, who are we going to hire? Well, Joe down the street, he's looking for a job. He's a nice man, right? He knows a little bit. Do we need to train him? I don't know. Let's find out. He's certainly not going to chase down George Floyd with 3 other cops in the middle of the day for no reason, right? So, where I live in Spring Valley, it's a no-brainer. We don't need cops. Everybody's armed. Everybody's armed. Nobody's coming up there. We had somebody stealing mail. Like meth heads will do this. They'll steal mail and try and get do identity theft. So they'll take the mail out of your mailbox, right? I just put a sign out there and said, "Don't do that. I'll let the dogs out." Right? That's all you gotta do. And these little meth heads are like, screw this. I don't want a German Shepherd on my ass, right? Or some crazy, nut with a gun walking down the street. I mean, people, when you get out of campus here and you walk down that road down there, people just walk down the road with rifles. I mean, that's normal. They're not, it's okay, So, anyway, can sections of larger towns and cities have community-funded police? I think so. It's been done in the past. Again, look at economic history. Look at where, and the police forces came, the giant institutions came out of good intentions. Don't get me wrong. I'm not picking on your Uncle Fred who's a cop in New York City. I'm sure he's a good man. But what I am saying is when you institutionalize something and make it a bureaucracy and fund it, where the funding comes from taxpayers who are not directly connected to the service that they are getting, you're going to have all kinds of externalities and unintended consequences, such as George Floyd's death. Now, again, I believe he was dying of alcoholism and that was the last straw, but that doesn't matter. We would deal with alcoholism, drug addiction in a different way, instead of allowing a bunch of police who are woefully incapable of dealing with those types of social service issues, and that's the whole thing. Defund the police and fund outpatient care or something along those lines, right? So what is the biggest job that the Glenwood Police Department does right now? Domestic, right? They go to domestic disputes and they go and roust the homeless. Because the homeless are doing some shit. They're piling up garbage in the woods, or they're lighting fires, or they're just shooting dope in the woods and doing what addicts do. Because it shouldn't be called a homeless problem. It should be called an addiction problem. Okay? Would private police be less likely to abuse their power if they were subject to market forces? That's a rhetorical question. But you may answer that if you're of the unconstrained vision of the world, you would say, no, we can train police to be good all the time. Right? We'll never have another George Floyd. And I would say, no, you're delusional. I'm of the constrained vision. I'm like, no, man has fallen. When you give a guy, man or woman, a gun and a baton, and you put him in a police car in a shitty place like Compton, they're going to get a crappy attitude after a while. Right? These are not easy, right? Anybody say, what's that movie with Jake Gyllenhaal and End of Shift or something? Oh my God.
End of Watch.
End of Watch. If you haven't seen End of Watch, watch End of Watch. It's hyperbole. It's Hollywood, but it's a documentary about Compton, and it's just heartbreaking.
Who dies? Jake Gyllenhaal or Michael?
No, the Pena dies. Who I wanted Gyllenhaal to get killed. No.
Hispanic one dies. The Hispanic one?
Yeah, Pena.
Yeah, Michael Pena.
He's like the greatest actor ever, isn't he good? He's so cool. I pray for the violence to end. Less cops, less violence? I don't know. Right? You go to the south side of Chicago, I got friends in Chicago. Black on black violence is just unbelievable. Like, what, are you going to ignore that statistic? As a social scientist, as an economist, you're going to ignore that statistic and say there's racism, therefore, right? People are dying. Okay, so that framing the question in the supply and demand. So when you answer the question, think of that. Think of oversupply. Think of government intervention in markets, meddling with markets. And then see, I'm trying to get you to think on the other side of that, hey, maybe the free market had the right, maybe Mayberry was okay. If it was up to me in Glenwood, I would have maybe 5 cops, no overnight shift. There's no crime, right? I don't need to be handing out tickets on 82. People are pretty prudent about the way they drive. There's always an a-hole. But if they get in an accident, they'll get sued. We have a court system to sort that out. Anyway, all right, let's go back to the book and figure out what's going on. I did send me a few. I sent myself a couple of articles, and I'll point them out to you really quickly. Just because. Oh no, come on. Making me sign in. Ta-da! Barron's Eco. There I am. This one's about Jerome Powell and inflation. I think I went over banking a little bit, but this I just wanted you to look at this. I get an email from these guys every day. This is American Institute for Economic Research. If you're getting your news from CNN, maybe you want to check this out. This is about monetary policy, and this is going to be very important going forward, leading up to the election, etc. The other article, and I don't want to spend a lot of time because I want to get into the other lecture. Oh, this was a great article. The Independent Institute, so these are my people, right? This was a great article. Panic by fears manufactured by the ruling class. You can see where we're going with this. So these are my people. If you're a lockdown person and you think I'm wrong, since obfuscation, pretense, and lies concerning COVID-19 are the effective agents of panic, this writer, who I didn't figure out who she is, Angelo. Oh, it's a dude, Angelo. Let's see who he is. Regime of fear. I can't say enough that I believe that most of this was created by fear. We should have never gone down this road of lockdowns. Wow.
Keep going.
The biggest and most significant default, however, has been Americans' Christian churches, all of them. I said this a lot of the Catholic Church, like, we don't have to listen to the government. We're a church. Truth Commission, wow. And as a professor emeritus of international relations at Boston University, member of the board of advisors at Independent Review. Okay, so he's not an idiot. You might think that he's a sycophant or these libertarians are crazy, and you're welcome to that opinion. But if you're interested in an article like that, it's on the Independent Institute. That's another organization that sort of thinks in that libertarian vein. All right. Now let's get over to here. When I got rid of. So again, my book stuff is what it is, and I'm sorry about that. But now I can't go into Launchpad, Krugman, Micro, Macmillan Macro. I want to go in here because now I gotta I unhooked it. Ebook, Launchpad. This is where you can go in this way too and get the 2 week deal. If you just go in here, buy or rent, right? I go into Launchpad, and my stuff should be there, and there it is. Krugman and Wells Macro, SVO2, right? Spring Valley. And enter your course. And then I can go down here to chapter. Oh, grade book, calendar. Oh, where's our resources? Content by chapter. We'll go to chapter 3, supply and demand. Finish this up. I think I had a little more to go, didn't I? Image slides, lecture slides.
You were real close, like maybe 60.
I think I was real close, but I want to make sure that I hammer down this idea of equilibrium. And when you go home and listen to the Austrian, Murray Rothbard, you're going to go, oh, okay, why do we have a pricing system? And here is supply and demand. So let's go down here, right? We'll go way down here. Did I get here? No. What happens in demand and supply? I think we got all done with supply and we were going to equilibriums. Yes, shifts it. This is the aggregate supply curve. Does everybody see that okay? If you don't, give me a holler. Horizontal sum of supply curves in all producers. Again, just like the demand curve, you're just aggregating. So they're getting you ready. Oh, let's go to present slide. They're getting you ready for that idea that we're going to be aggregating and calling it macroeconomics. Again, you know, the Austrian school just says it's economics. You know, Krugman and the Keynesians, they call it micro and macro. So here we went from this would be considered micro, and this would be considered macro, right? Micro at the level of firm or individual, macro aggregate, okay? So horizontal sum of individual supply curves. When QS equals QD at a certain price, the market is in equilibrium. Quantity supplied, right? Remember our rents. We've got a downward sloping demand curve, upward sloping supply curve, equilibrium, price and quantity, right? Price and quantity. Okay? When QS, quantity supplied, equals quantity demanded, right? QS, QD, when those two are equal, we have this equilibrium price. Well, we never really do we? Right? It's sort of an ideal. It's a model. Pricing actually ends up being this lattice work that just keeps on moving and changing all the time, right? You say to yourself, gosh darn it, prices at this King Soopers in town are crazy, and then you look around and they opened up another one up in Carbondale, and so you're competing. Well, it's Kroger competing against Kroger, but they always run sales when they open up a new supermarket, right? So you go up there, right? Or you go to the Carcinera. You go, I can't say that word either in Spanish. You get your meat at the local meat guy, The price at which this takes place is the equilibrium price, also referred to as the market clearing price. This is a constant, a constantly moving target. That's why, and what I want to nail home here is that's what they get wrong in the socialist idea, is that we're going to set all these prices and it's going to be okay. And anybody who knows about prices says, no, they change all the time. They're constantly changing. It's a moving target. So you constantly, this equilibrium price and quantity changes over seasonality and supply, oversupply. Too many producers enter the market. The demand changes. All sorts of things occur. This is what killed the Soviet Union. It just killed them. They couldn't do it. They couldn't figure out how many nails they needed. Right? They couldn't figure out the supply of nails, and then they couldn't figure out what the price ought to be. Right? And we call this the calculation problem in socialism. Right? What should the price of rents be in the Roaring Fork Valley? Well, I don't know. If you're 20, they should be $500. If you're my age, I'm like, well, we can handle $2,500. We just made the decision to buy another damn house against my will because we couldn't afford the rents. That's crazy right there. So look at equilibrium. Look at how I nailed that demand curve. I freaking put that demand curve right where they put it. I just want to show you that. That's called being lucky. I'd rather be lucky than smart. So market clearing price, the quantity of the goods and service bought and sold at the price of the equilibrium quantity. So keep this in mind as you look at prices of things. Then you go out and you buy stuff. How much can Starbucks charge before you go, Jesus, a cup of coffee is a cup of coffee, right? Sorry, Lord. When do you say that? When do you do that? Like, oh my gosh, this is too much, right? Well, it's hard to say. It's different for everyone. Nick's level of pain is probably a lot lower than mine. Well, maybe not, because I am cheap. But I see guys. I help guys in sobriety. That's my other volunteer world, is in the recovery community. Guys are brand new sober. They don't have a pot to piss in and a window to throw it out of. They got nothing. They're in debt up to their ears because of their drug habit or whatever they were doing. And they walk in to see me and they got a Starbucks coffee. I'm like, dude, what are you doing? You have no money. You have negative income right now. And you're buying Starbucks. With what? My money. So why do all sales and purchases in a market take place at the same price? Where consumers don't have time to compare prices, like a tourist trap. You ever go to Sioux Villa? I love Sioux Villa in our town. Different stores have different prices. In well-established markets, there's a uniform price. I would say more. Not even a gallon of milk, or think of a generic product. There's still little pricing nuances that go on. So you see that immediately, where I kind of leave the Keynesians behind, because I'm like, no, prices don't have that great a uniformity ever. And products are diverse. They diversify. There's a surplus of a good when the quantity supply exceeds the quantity demanded. Surpluses occur when the price is above the equilibrium level. So I set a price for rents below the equilibrium level, and what did we have? We had a shortage, right? Right? Surplus, the price is below the equilibrium level, okay? Surpluses do not last. Sellers will reduce price so they can move the goods off the shelves. When Nick takes that capstone, you start selling sneakers, and you miss the mark. You don't sell enough sneakers. Your salespeople don't get it done, whatever. There's a recession. Something happens, right? The world is not linear. Remember that, not linear. And so you've got inventory at the end of the year. What do? Well, you blow it out to Costco, right? You've seen those. You go to Costco. What are you buying? You're buying people's excess inventory that they didn't sell. Great idea, Costco. So price above the equilibrium level creates a surplus. The surplus will push the price down until it reaches that $3 level, right? Here's our equilibrium price and quantity, 3 and 10. But look what happens here. The quantity demanded will be at 350 will be less. The quantity supplied, of course, will be this. It'll be more. So what happens? Simple. Now you do this you write this out for every question. Just doodle it on just like in accounting when I say use T accounts. When you're doing supply and demand problems, use the figure. Make the graph roughly, and it'll start to stick in your head. Okay? There's the surplus right here. The distance, the amount between here and here, 8.1 to 11.2. That'll be the oversupply of natural gas. Okay? What are we going to do with it? There's too much supply. Now we got to store it. It'll cost money to store it. Nobody wants to store it. We'd rather burn it. Right? There's a shortage when the quantity demanded exceeds the quantity supply. Shortages occur. Same thing. Shortages don't last. People jump into the market. They start drilling wells. They start making it, they start fracking. Technology changes. Something happens is what I'm getting at. Something will happen. The surplus will push the price down until it reaches the equilibrium price. Let's have the same kind of, okay, there's our equilibrium, 3 and 10. If the quantity supply goes down, the price will go down, right? Boom, boom. There's the shortage. The quantity demanded shortage, right? So everybody goes, oh gosh, we gotta fill up this demand shortage. An increase in demand leads to a movement along the supply curve to a higher equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity. Look at this effect. A new demand curve. I don't know why. D2. D2. More population. Right? More population equals more energy consumption. That could be the reason. There could be other reasons. But nonetheless, D1 and D2 are separate curves. But the supply, what's the effect on the supply? We go to Q2. Whatever Q2 is at P2. Okay? Increase in demand creates this movement along the supply curve from one price to another. All right? What happens when the supply curve shifts? Well, same thing, only backwards. right? We get a movement along the demand curve. From equilibrium 1 to equilibrium 2 will make for a different quantity demanded. Okay? All right, now, again, draw these out to try and figure out what's happening. If you do it in your head, you'll get confused in the beginning, and then it gets easier and easier. But it's just like accounting or any other thing that you got to learn by memorization. And it's a law. You don't just go, that law doesn't work anymore, and I shouldn't pay any attention to it, and the government should set prices. That's an opinion, an ideological opinion, and I'll point you towards history and say, historically that hasn't worked. The law of supply and demand always takes over. Garden gnomes, a Cleaver favorite. Regain popular. When were they not popular? They were always popular at our house. Regain popularity. What will happen? Equilibrium price and quantity both fall? Nick? No. Equilibrium price and quantity both rise? Which one is it?
Bravo.
Right? Equilibrium price and quantity both rise when garden gnomes regain popularity, as if it ever left. Price cost of wood falls. What happens to the equilibrium price and quantity of the violin market? That's a stupid one. Yeah, I mean, Stradivarius is made out of some crazy wood. I don't even know what it is. That's a type of violin, by the way. Stradivarius, if you're a musician, you know that. I'm not, but I just am smart. Cost of wood falls. What will happen to the price and quantity? Again, price falls and quantity rises. Correct answer. Price will fall because that's an input, that wood. It's gopher wood. I don't even know what they use. But certain woods sound better, I guess. Simultaneous shifts of demand and supply curves. If the decrease in demand is relatively larger than the increase in supply, the equilibrium price and quantity falls. If the increase in supply is large relative to the decrease in demand, the equilibrium quantity rises. Already they're trying to confuse you with all sorts of mumbo jumbo. Those of us in the Austrian world, we're like, you don't have to measure everything. It's just look at the effect and get the idea of what happened here. Okay? Here's what it looks like. Look at all this to make that happen. It's relatively larger. Now next they're going to try and put mathematics into it, and this is where you start to lose me. So when you do the homework, you don't get all worried about the math. Do it a couple times. Try and get it in your head. Do it, especially if you're going to transfer to DU or CU or somewhere where all you're going to get from here on in, all of your education, quite likely, unless you go to like Auburn or UT where there's a bunch of Austrians, is Clemson. All you're going to get is the Keynesian view of this. And so they're going to say, well, you need 3 years of calculus before you can do economics. And you can say, that's not what Professor Cleaver says. He says, I need more social science and psychology. That's a debate. That is a debate. Okay, consumers in Mayville consider houses and apartments to be substitutes. Who doesn't? This was our problem last week, right? There's an increase in the price of houses in Mayville. At the same time, 3 new apartment buildings opened there. In the market for apartments in Mayville, what's happening? Right? Increase the price at the same time. 3 new apartment buildings open there. Market for apartment.
Charlie.
What?
Charlie.
Equilibrium quantity may rise. Yes? Did you see it? Okay. And now, with that one, we're on 48. Let me give you my problem very quickly. Get out of there. Escape, don't save, and I'm going to go home, And I'm going to go to chapter 4. Chapter 4. And we'll go to lecture slides. Now we're going to start meddling with markets. But let's do my thing so you can see what happened to Kelly and I last week. So, and these are high-class problems, so bear with me. So I said to Kelly, right, we got this house in Spring Valley. Spring Valley house is paid for. The price, I figured, because I'm your economics teacher, I figured the prices are really frothy. I think we're at the top of another 2008 or close to that, where the whole thing's going to collapse again. This is what I believe. So I said to Kelly's also, we're tired of doing the work. There's a lot of, Nick knows, big house, a lot of work. She's got an Airbnb on it. Like, we're out, that's it. Alice has got, she's in 7th grade. So we're staying in the area. But we want to get rid of the big house and play small ball. I want the money to put into the market, right? Okay, because it's a big house. We put it on the market for $1.2 million, right? 4,800 feet. Cottage is another 1,600 feet. There's a 4-bay garage, 5 acres. It's a lot of house. Okay, more house than we need. Okay, so the SD house, 1.2 million. Okay, we ended up with 1.075. That's where we ended up. So we got our money coming up, hopefully. Now we want to rent. Here's where the problem starts. Because I want to put that money into the market and get a yield. I need a yield on that money. And the yield on that $1 million is going to pay for our apartment. Well, what can I expect on $1 million investment? Let's say 5%.
I'm gonna get 10.
5%. We're conservative. 5% tax-free in the municipal bond market. So what's 5% of $1 million? Do the math, somebody.
50 grand.
50,000 per year. That's what that $1 million is going to throw up. Can you live on 50,000 a year? Let's say divided by 12. What is that? I don't know. It's like 4,000 something. 4K a month. So let's say we've got a little over 4K a month.
4166.
Right? 4166 to put into renting. And I'm like, well, we don't need all this. We could do this with a little house or even an apartment. So Callie goes out into the rental market with what she figures I can make on this money if I don't F it up, okay? And that'll pay our rent. And then I've got little jobs and other things I can add to that, and we can eat and all that kind of stuff. So what are you going to get for 4K a month? Well, it turns out, and I only wanted to pay maybe $2,500 a month on rent, and I want to bank the rest, okay? There is nothing in this market for $2,500. So $2,500, 3-bedroom of any size at all doesn't exist. We go over, she finally goes over to the meadows, behind the meadows, and behind the meadows is 3,200 plus utilities for a 3-bedroom apartment. Right? And those new ones and if you're not from this valley, they're new apartment buildings. It's a 3-bedroom apartment. Really nice, new. It's a really great place. $3,200. Now here's where the mismatch is, and this is where the meddling with markets comes from. Interest rates are now at 0, effectively. I can get a 3 6.08% 30-year fixed mortgage. Because I qualify. Kelly qualifies. We got great credit, all that, right? We're gonna have $1 million in the bank, thrown or invested. So we can get this great thing. So it turns out we can go down to Lakota. We move down Valley where it's cheaper. We go down to Lakota, which is a club. It's like a golf. It's a development, but they have a club and a pool and all this other BS, like a golf course. We can buy a $670,000 house and put down 20%. What is that? 6 times 2 is 12. 134,000, and finance the rest. So we put down that 134K, finance the rest. Our payment will be something like $2,400 per month for a 5-bedroom big house on a golf course. $79 a month for HOA fees, right? I can't not do this, but this is wrong. This is disequilibrium. And what is this created by? Why are rents so far above this? Well, I'll show you. This is called the price of money. Okay? That disequilibrium does not exist but for the Federal Reserve. So the Fed, right? The Fed, this is dollars. Price of money. All right? Here's supply, demand for money, right? As the price rises, the demand for money goes down. What's the price? Well, it's the interest rate, turns out. So at supply, at this price, let's say 0%, the demand for money is here. That's equilibrium in this situation. But that's incorrect, right? Because people have to get return. They can't get 0% for their money. Banks won't loan any money at 0%. They can't turn on the lights for that. 0 is 0. That's not a price. Okay? So the Fed can't do that. So what is the correct interest rate? Well, now it's 3% or 3.08 for 30-year mortgage. How many mortgages will they get? Well, this is where it gets weird. When you set the price of money, you create a shortage of housing, right? Because everybody will want to jump in and buy a house. I couldn't afford to not buy. And I was like, gosh darn it, I don't want a house. I was hoping to rent for a while. We wanted to buy a place on the ocean, and sort of rent here and own there and Airbnb it while we're not there and do it. We had this whole scheme in our heads. I don't want a house, but I'm forced to buy a house because rents and mortgages don't match. And they don't match directly because the Federal Reserve is setting the price of a mortgage. This should be somewhere around 6% or somewhere around that in order for rents to equal mortgages, right? So if you came to me today as a young person and you said, should I buy or rent? I just gave you the dollars and cents. You gotta buy. You're forced to buy. Right? Because now you'll at least have an asset. But here's the other problem. Because of this, you end up with what we had in 2008, which is this oversupply. The housing booms, boom, 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 and the prices go, that house that we're buying for $670, what's it really worth? I don't know, $250? In materials? because that's where it's going. So I'm buying this asset knowing goddamn well it's about to collapse. But I gotta have a place to live. So you've got this Gordian knot, this like sword of Damocles, right? This is with those, right? I have this sword of Damocles over my head. This is not a decision. I'm forced because of the government intervention to do the thing I don't want to do. Right? Is that crazy? And you say, well, this is all high-class problems, and I'm not bitching. But given different incentives, I would be renting, which is what I want to do. Okay, now, so here we go, meddling with markets. This is what we'll end the day with. We got about 10 minutes to get into it, and we'll continue on Monday. Tuesday, sorry. Slideshow. I'm going to put up some other lectures by Murray, and he goes over price controls and quotas in energy, and it's a shocking lecture because, like me, he's very interested in the history of economics, and so most of you, if you're young, or maybe if you're not so young, have gone through, thanks for the coffee, have gone through most of your life thinking that we have free market capitalism and it fails all the time, and that's why the government has to get involved. Nothing could be more wrong. We have always had government intervention in markets ever since. Do you realize that the entire economy, the federal government was supported by tariffs until 1913 when they started the income tax? I mean, that blows some people away. Now, if you listen to me enough, you already know that. But we've always taxed goods coming into the country, which is a tariff. The tariff is a tax. I was looking at the news the other morning, and Joe Biden was talking about bringing jobs back to America. And he sounded exactly like Trump. They both sound alike, right? But Biden's program was, well, we're going to tax any company that moves overseas, we're going to tax them. I'm like, how's that different from putting a tax on goods coming in? You get the same effect, except in this case, I would say, don't tax the domestic company, tax the foreign company. So in that case, I'm a Trumpian, even though I hate tariffs and I think free trade is better, I got to go with the Trump solution to getting more jobs in America. Just different ways but they're the same. They're both saying the same thing. We've outsourced our jobs to China. So Biden's saying Trump's an idiot. It's like, what do you mean? You guys agree? You moron. But he doesn't care about that. He just wants to be elected so he can enrich himself. Whether or not Trump cares about enriching himself is up for grabs. I think he just likes to be in office. I don't know. What is a market intervention? Well, we just went over a couple. Price controls and quantity controls, two main forms, right? Price control, rent control, right? Price control, Federal Reserve. That's a price control. Okay, it's just that simple. Who benefits and who loses? People who save lose. So if your parents came here and they're living in a one-bedroom apartment so they can save money, they got screwed by the Federal Reserve, who lowered interest rates to the point where a savings account pays nothing. Whereas in 1986, when I started farming, you could go to any bank in 1986 and get a savings account that bore 5 or 6% yearly APR. Now, what do you get? 0.01, or it's not even worth putting your money in the bank, right? Who benefits and who loses? Savers lose in that case. Why are economists often skeptical of market intervention? So here comes Krugman, and he's starting out okay. Krugman and Wells, Dr. Wells, I always forget. She's as smart as he is. And why do governments undertake market interventions even though they create losses to society? Well, what about this? Right? We should start a fairness committee. Okay, interference. Because of rent control policies, and affordable and available rental apartments hard to find in New York City. Why? I just showed you why. But I'm going to show you again, just to nail it home. Price controls are legal restrictions on how high or low a market price may go. There are two main types. The first one's a price ceiling. The second one's a price floor. A minimum price, maximum price. Right? Price floor, think minimum wage. Right? Buyers are required to pay for a good. Price ceiling, think rent control. Okay? Market prices do not necessarily please buyers. They may lobby the government, and it's so funny, he sounds so much like me in this. Because when people, the U.S. Steel lobbied the government to get tariffs on foreign steel. Right? So the union and U.S. Steel went to Washington and lobbied the government to get tariffs on U.S. steel, on foreign-made steel. And we do this trick where we tell you, oh, well, the steel workers are going to lose their jobs, and da-da-da-da-da. And I'm like, well, we do this with the United Auto Workers and General Motors and all kinds of things like that. We slap tariffs on Toyota cars and do all kinds of crap like this. Don't be fooled. They're buying votes. That's what the politicians are doing with tariffs. You know, Trump may say, well, I'm getting more steel. You know, the steel workers are being protected and we're saving American jobs. All true. But he's also, he's going to a special interest group directly to get their support in an election. And he's not alone. If you think that, Barack Obama hovered above us with a halo, you're full of shit. So helped him by altering the price. Here's modeling a price ceiling. Okay, here's the market. This is monthly rent. We already did this, so I'll do it quickly. Without government intervention, the market for apartments reaches equilibrium at point E. There it is. $1,000, 2 million apartments, and then we mess around with it, and what happens? We put them at 800, we're going to have a shortage. For years, I rode the train into New York City from Connecticut, and you'd go by the Bronx, and it looked like it had been bombed in World War II. Because not only do you have this shortage, but the landlords that remain become this terrible word called a slumlord, right? What's a slumlord? Say, oh, those greedy landlords who are screwing us and they won't replace the light bulbs in the hallways and all that. Well, duh, they're getting $800 for a $1,000 apartment. So what are they going to do? They're going to reduce services. They're not going to upgrade the building. They're not going to build a new building. Forget about the rest of it. Because they can't get any yield on their investment at 800. At 800, they can barely stay here, right? They can barely keep their head above water, so they're like, the hell with it. So what happens? The neighborhood deteriorates, right? Like you get like all this, and then the government comes in and says, well, we'll build low-cost housing, and they do things like Pruitt-Igoe, Carolina. If you're reading Amity Schleys, when she goes over, I just got her book on the war on poverty, and one of the examples is this huge government apartment complex in St. Louis called Pruitt-Igoe. They eventually dynamited the whole thing. It was such a failure. It was riddled with rats and, people killing one another and junkies and everything else. So what do you end up with? Right? You mess around with the market, you end up with that. When you take these price controls off, you know that the hardest places to get an apartment in this country, New York City, San Francisco, a few other places. Why? Because they have rent control. Period. So,
5 minutes.
price ceilings cause predictable side effects, inefficiently low quality. That's what I was just talking about, right? Crappy buildings. Inefficient allocation to customers.
No, low quality too.
Low quality. Oh, low quantity. I'm sorry. Low quality. And black markets. So in New York, it was famous. My dad had partners that were living in rent-controlled apartments because they're grandfathered in, and there's no way that you can manage this system of favors. So it ends up being, you end up with this black market where they go, all right, the apartment is 800, right? So the apartment's 800, but there's a key charge to get the key, and the key charge is 400 a month for the keys to the apartment. That's not, right? The market always wins. Or if you want a parking space, it's 10 grand a year. Right? Or some crazy shit to get around this. And then they get caught and the government says, thou shalt not do that. And you know, they go to jail or whatever. They say, screw it, I'm not doing this anymore. Right? And so you end up with an oversupply of luxury buildings. You end up with what we call gentrification. You end up with Aspen. Right? That's what you end up with. Because what builder would build a building where it was going to get rent controlled? So they don't. So you have an affordable housing shortage. Right? Whatever affordable means, because that's subjective. It's like nailing Jello to a tree. My affordable is different from your affordable.
3 minutes.
3 minutes. Okay, measuring inefficiently low quantity. You can measure it, the area of the shaded triangles, and they're going to do this in your homework, right? Let's see. Oh, they didn't do it here. Shaded triangle corresponds to the amount of total surplus loss to the inefficiency low quantity transacted, right? So it's here, right? Winners and losers. Producers lose, some lucky renters gain. You know, my sister Sue was in a rent-controlled apartment on 125th Street and York Avenue. It was like right on the edge of a really bad part of town, and it was a 4-story walk-up. She had the top floor, and it was cheap, and she could live there. I moved her there when I was like 18. She was 20, and she could make it there, but it was like the dope dealer was like 1 block over. You know, it deteriorated fast. But she got that apartment because it got passed to her and she was not on the lease. It was my ex-girlfriend's brother who was on the lease. Right? So it was a scam. It was a scam we were pulling. Because she was working for Solomon Smith Barney at the time, and she wasn't making shit. She needed a cheap rent. You know, soon enough she was making more than that. But nonetheless, we couldn't get an apartment without that sublet that was basically this bullshit scam that was going on. Because her name never touched that lease. So anyhow, that's what you get. You get all these weird outcomes. So, price controls distort signals that would help the goods, and we'll finish with this one, get allocated to their highest value uses. This is amazing that they start the stack like this and say, hey, this is a rule, this happens, and then they'll go on Tuesday and you'll go, oh my God, you know, how did they change their tune? And I'm going to point it out. Most professors just go through the stack and they go, oh, this is how it is. Tra-la-la, and Krugman's right, and everything's fine, and I'm in there going, wait a minute. Universal price controls caused widespread and persistent shortages in the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. Okay? That's the Soviet Union. Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. They couldn't figure out how much peanut butter to make and how much jelly to make. Because they didn't have any prices.
That's it.
Okay? Just another day in the USSR breadline, average time in line for a Soviet woman, 2 hours every day, 7 days a week. To wait for food. Because of that persistent shortage. All right? Anyway, we'll go over some more of that next week. Thanks very much. Stay on the line if you got a question for me or concern, and I will see you next Tuesday. Thanks very much for coming.